The rope burns on Jacob Marrow's wrists were still bleeding when they dragged him to the chapel. They said Evelyn Cross had buried 3 husbands in 4 years, each one found cold in their beds with no mark upon them. No poison in their blood, just death silent as a whisper. The town of Redemption Spring decided Jacob would be the 4th, payment for a debt he couldn't refuse and a crime he couldn't prove he didn't commit. They forced the marriage at gunpoint, and every man present looked at him like he was already in his grave. No one would say what she'd done to deserve such a reputation. They only said that any man fool enough to marry Evelyn Cross never saw his next spring. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this tale of betrayal and secrets in the Old West, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from. Now, let's get back to Jacob's story. Jacob Marrow had been running for 6 months when they caught him outside of Santa Rosa. He wasn't an outlaw, not in the way most men understood the word. He'd never robbed a bank or shot a lawman. But he'd killed a man in Tucson, a rancher's son, who'd been forcing himself on a saloon girl, and the rancher had money enough to make sure Jacob's face ended up on wanted posters from Arizona to the Colorado border. Self-defense didn't matter when the dead man's father owned half the territory. The bounty hunters who caught him weren't interested in taking him back to Tucson. They had other plans. Silas Wardlow was a big man with a thick beard and eyes like chips of dirty ice. He owned most of Redemption Spring, the general store, the bank, the land office. When his men brought Jacob in, Wardlow looked him over like he was examining livestock at auction. "You're Jacob Marrow," Wardlow said. It wasn't a question. Jacob sat in the chair they'd shoved him into, hands bound, face bruised from where they'd beaten him for trying to run. He didn't answer. "Wanted for murder in Tucson," Wardlow continued, reading from a telegram. "Says here you shot young Thomas Brennan through the heart. His father's offering $500 for you, dead or alive." "It was self-defense," Jacob said, tasting blood in his mouth. Wardlow smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I don't care if it was the second coming. What I care about is that you're here and I have a use for you. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. You will be." Wardlow leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his considerable belly. "You see, I have a problem. We all do, really. There's a woman in this town, Evelyn Cross. Perhaps you've heard of her." Jacob hadn't, but he kept his face neutral. "She's a widow," Wardlow said, 3 times over. Each husband died in their marriage bed, peaceful as Sunday morning, except they were young men in good health. The first was my nephew. The second was the son of the man who owned the livery. The third was a drifter we thought might finally be mean enough to survive her. "What are you saying? That she's a witch?" "I'm saying she's a killer, but we can't prove it. No poison, no violence, no witnesses. The doctor says they just stopped breathing. Like something reached inside them and squeezed their hearts until they quit beating." Jacob felt cold despite the heat of the room. "And you want me to what? Arrest her?" Wardlow laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Arrest her?" "No, Mr. Marrow. I want you to marry her." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. "You're out of your mind." "Am I?" Wardlow stood, walking to the window. Outside, Redemption Spring baked under the late afternoon sun. "Here's how I see it. You're a dead man already. Brennan's father will find you eventually, and when he does, you'll hang. But I can make you disappear. I can tell those bounty hunters you died trying to escape. I can wire Tucson and tell them the matter is settled. All you have to do is marry Evelyn Cross and find out how she's killing these men. And then what? I end up dead like the others?" "Maybe." Wardlow turned back to him, and his expression was serious now. "But maybe you're smart enough to stay alive. And if you do, if you can prove she's a murderer, you'll have earned your freedom. No more running. No more looking over your shoulder." Jacob stared at the man, trying to find the angle, the hidden trap. "Why not just run her out of town? Why this?" "Because she owns property here. Land her first husband left her. Good land with water rights. If she dies without an heir, that land reverts to the town. To me, But if she's convicted of murder, she hangs and the land is forfeit immediately. Wardlow's smile returned. You see? Everyone wins. Except her. And if I refuse, then I send word to Tucson that you're here. You'll be on a train south by morning, and they'll hang you before sunset. Your choice, Mr. Marrow. Die for certain, or take your chances with the widow. They brought him before the preacher that same evening. The chapel was empty except for Wardlow, 2 of his men, and the preacher himself, a thin, nervous man named Reverend Holt, who kept wiping sweat from his forehead even though the evening air was cool. Jacob's hands were still bound. He'd been given water and a change of clothes, but the shirt was too big and the pants too short, like they'd belonged to a dead man. Maybe they had. The door opened, and Evelyn Cross walked in. Jacob had expected something monstrous, some visible sign of the evil Wardlow claimed she carried. Instead, he saw a woman in her late 20s with dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, wearing a plain gray dress that had been mended more than once. She was tall, slender, with sharp features and eyes the color of a storm brewing over distant mountains. She looked at Jacob without fear, without surprise, without anything at all in her expression. Miss Cross, Wardlow said, standing. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Her voice was quiet, controlled. Everyone has choices. You could leave Redemption Spring. Sell your land and go somewhere else. We both know you'd never let me sell that land. She turned her attention to Jacob, studying him with the same careful neutrality. Who is this? Your new husband. Jacob Marrow, meet Evelyn Cross. Neither of them spoke. Wardlow gestured to Reverend Holt. Proceed. The ceremony was brief, perfunctory, stripped of every grace that might make it holy. Holt stumbled through the words, his voice shaking. When he asked if there were any objections, the silence stretched so long Jacob thought someone might actually speak. No one did. When it was done, one of Wardlow's men cut the ropes binding Jacob's wrists. You're free to go, Wardlow said. Both of you. The house is yours, Evelyn. Try to keep this one alive longer than the others. Evelyn said nothing. She turned and walked out of the chapel, and after a moment, Jacob followed. The house sat at the edge of town, separated from the other buildings by a quarter-mile of scrub grass and dust. It was small but well-built, with a covered porch and shutters that had been painted white once but had faded to the color of old bone. A barn stood behind it, and beyond that, the land stretched toward the mountain's good grazing land, Jacob noticed, with a creek running through it that probably never went dry. Worth killing for, if you were that kind of man. Evelyn unlocked the door and went inside without waiting to see if Jacob followed. He did, stepping into a dim interior that smelled of dust and dried herbs. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all at once. A door on the left led to what he assumed was the bedroom. Everything was neat, almost Spartan. No photographs, no personal items, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. Evelyn lit a lamp, then turned to face him. You can sleep in the barn, she said. Jacob almost laughed. I'm your husband. You're a man Silas Wardlow forced on me to see if I'll kill you. I won't, but I won't share my bed with you either. Fair enough. He looked around the room. You got any food? There's bread and salt pork. Help yourself. She moved toward the bedroom door, then paused. The well is out back. There's a horse in the barn. You can tend to it in the morning. Don't try to run. Wardlow has men watching, I figured. She studied him for a long moment, and Jacob had the uncomfortable sensation of being assessed by someone very intelligent, someone who saw more than he wanted her to. Why'd you agree to this? Same reason you did. Didn't have a choice. Everyone has choices, Mr. Marrow. We just don't always like them. She disappeared into the bedroom and closed the door. Jacob heard a bolt slide into place. He stood alone in the main room, listening to the silence of the house, wondering if this was where he was going to die. Jacob woke before dawn, his body stiff from sleeping on the barn floor. He'd found some old blankets that smelled of horse and hay, made himself a rough bed in one of the empty stalls. The horse, a gray Marrow with intelligent eyes, had watched him with mild curiosity. He'd checked the barn thoroughly before settling down, looking for weapons, tools, anything useful. There was a pitchfork, some rope, a few rusted farm implements. Nothing that would help him if Wardlow decided to end this arrangement early. He walked to the well and drew water, splashing his face, trying to shake the fog from his mind. The sky was lightening in the east, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. It was beautiful country, he had to admit. The kind of place a man could make a life, if circumstances were different. If he wasn't married to a woman who might kill him in his sleep. The back door of the house opened, and Evelyn emerged carrying a basket. She wore the same gray dress, her hair already braided. She didn't acknowledge Jacob as she walked past him toward a small garden plot he hadn't noticed the night before. She knelt and began pulling weeds, working with efficient, practiced movements. Jacob dried his face on his shirt and walked over. "Need help?" "No." He stood there awkwardly, then sat on the ground a few feet away. "You're going to have to talk to me eventually." "Why?" "Because we're married. Because people are watching to see what happens. Because maybe if we're going to survive this, we need to figure out how to at least tolerate each other." Evelyn pulled another weed, tossed it aside. "You don't want to know if I killed those men, did you? Would you believe me if I said no?" Jacob considered that. "I don't know. But I figure if you wanted me dead, you'd have done it already." She glanced at him, and for the first time, he saw something other than cool neutrality in her expression. Curiosity, maybe, or surprise. "Most men would have run by now. I told you. I don't have anywhere to run to." Evelyn went back to her weeding. They sat in silence for a while, Jacob watching her work, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the monster Wardlow had described. She moved like someone who'd done hard labor all her life, her hands sure and strong. There were old scars on her forearms, thin white lines that looked like blade cuts. "My first husband was Wardlow's nephew," Evelyn said suddenly. "Samuel. He was 22 when we married. I was 19. He seemed kind enough at first, but after the wedding, he changed. He drank. He hit me. One night he came home drunk and mean, and he said he was going to teach me a lesson I wouldn't forget." She paused, her hands still. "He died that night. In bed, just like Wardlow said. Peaceful as a sleeping child." Jacob waited, sensing there was more. "My second husband was Marcus Thorne, the livery owner's son. Wardlow arranged that marriage too, said it would be good for me to have a husband again, that people were starting to talk. Marcus was worse than Samuel. He lasted 6 months before he died the same way. And the third? A drifter named Cole Brennan. No relation to your Brennan, far as I know. Wardlow brought him in special, told him if he could survive a year married to me, he'd pay him $1,000. Cole made it 4 months. Jacob absorbed this, trying to find the pattern. They all died in bed. Yes, no marks, no poison, nothing the doctor could find. And you never explained how." Evelyn looked at him directly now, and her eyes were hard. "I never explained because no one ever asked. They just decided I was guilty, and that was that. Easier to believe I'm some kind of demon than to look at what those men were." "What were they?" "Cruel, violent, the kind of men who think a wife is property to be used however they want." She stood, brushing dirt from her dress. "But I didn't kill them, Mr. Marrow. Not the way you're thinking." "Then how?" She picked up her basket of weeds. "You'll figure it out. Or you won't. Either way, you'll be dead or gone in a few months. And Wardlow will find someone else to send after me." She walked back to the house, leaving Jacob sitting in the garden with more questions than answers. The next few days fell into an uneasy routine. Jacob tended the horse, fixed a broken fence rail, cleared brush from around the barn. Evelyn worked her garden, cooked simple meals that she left on the table for him, and otherwise kept to herself. They barely spoke. At night, she locked herself in the bedroom, and he returned to the barn. Wardlow's men came by twice, checking on them. They didn't hide their presence, sitting on horses just beyond the property line, watching. making sure Jacob didn't run and Evelyn didn't try to leave. On the fourth day, Jacob was mending the barn door when he heard voices from the house. He looked up and saw 3 women standing on the porch, talking to Evelyn. Town women, by the look of their dresses. Evelyn's posture was stiff, defensive. Jacob set down his tools and walked over. "Don't care what Silas says," one of the women was saying as Jacob approached. She was older, heavy-set, with iron gray hair. "You're not welcome at the church social. You're not welcome anywhere decent folk gather." "Mrs. Patterson," Evelyn said quietly, "I've lived here for 7 years. I've never caused trouble. You've killed 3 men. I was cleared of any wrongdoing. The doctor is a fool, and everyone knows it." Mrs. Patterson noticed Jacob approaching, and her lip curled. "And now you've got another one. How long do you think this one will last?" Jacob stepped onto the porch. "Ladies, something I can help you with?" The woman looked him up and down. "You're the one Silas brought in. The murderer from Tucson. I'm Jacob Marrow. And I didn't murder anyone. That's what they all say." She turned back to Evelyn. "Mark my words, girl. Whatever devil's bargain you've made, it'll catch up to you. God sees everything." The women left, their skirts rustling in the dust. Evelyn stood very still, staring after them. Jacob could see her hands trembling slightly. "You get that often?" he asked. "Often enough." She went inside without another word. That night, Jacob lay in the barn, listening to the wind and thinking about what Mrs. Patterson had said. Devil's bargain. It was an interesting choice of words. Not curse, not witchcraft. Bargain, like Evelyn had made a deal with something. He thought about the scars on her arms. The way she moved, always aware of her surroundings, always ready. The careful control she maintained over every word, every expression. She was hiding something, that was certain. But was it murder? Or was it something else? On the 7th day, Jacob woke to the sound of breaking glass. He was on his feet instantly, grabbing the pitchfork as he ran toward the house. The front window had been shattered, and through it he could see figures moving inside. He heard Evelyn cry out, heard male laughter. Jacob hit the front door with his shoulder, bursting into the main room. 3 men were inside. 2 he didn't recognize, rough-looking ranch hands in dusty clothes and worn boots. The 3rd was one of Wardlow's men, the one who'd stood guard during the wedding. They'd cornered Evelyn near the bedroom door. One of the strangers had her by the arm. "Let her go," Jacob said, raising the pitchfork. The men turned. Wardlow's man grinned. "Well, look who's still alive. Told you she hadn't killed him yet, boys. Maybe she's losing her touch. I said let her go." "Or what? You'll stick us with that pitchfork?" The man laughed. "We're just delivering a message from Mr. Wardlow. He wants to know how the investigation is going. Found out how she does it yet?" "There's nothing to find out." "Sure there is. 3 dead men don't lie." He nodded to the man holding Evelyn. "Maybe we should help him look for clues. Check the bedroom. See if she's got some kind of poison hidden under the mattress." The man started dragging Evelyn toward the bedroom. She fought him, and Jacob saw something flash in her eyes, not fear, but rage, cold and controlled. "I'm warning you," Jacob said, stepping forward. Wardlow's man pulled a revolver, pointed it at Jacob's chest. "You're warning us? That's rich. Listen, Marrow. You're here to do a job. We're here to make sure you do it. Now put that pitchfork down before someone gets hurt." Jacob calculated his chances. The pitchfork was no match for a gun. But if he did nothing, they'd hurt Evelyn, and something in him couldn't allow that. Maybe it was because she was his wife, even if it was a forced marriage. Maybe it was because he'd spent too much of his life watching the strong prey on the weak. Or maybe it was because he was starting to suspect that Evelyn Cross wasn't guilty of anything except surviving. He lowered the pitchfork slowly, then lunged. The man fired, but Jacob was already moving, driving his shoulder into the man's gut. The bullet went wide, punching through the wall. They crashed to the floor, and Jacob got his hand on the revolver, twisting it away. The other 2 men moved to help. But then there was a sound like thunder, and one of them dropped, clutching his leg. Jacob looked up. Evelyn stood in the bedroom doorway, holding a double-barreled shotgun. "Get out," she said. Her voice was steady as stone. "All of you, now." The man Jacob was wrestling with went still. Wardlow's man raised his hand slowly. "You're making a mistake, Evelyn. The only mistake was letting you in my house." She advanced a step, the shotgun never wavering. "Tell Wardlow if he sends anyone else, they won't walk away." The men scrambled for the door, half dragging their injured companion. When they were gone, Evelyn lowered the shotgun and sat down heavily on the floor, the weapon across her lap. Jacob stood, breathing hard, checking himself for injuries. Nothing serious. He looked at Evelyn. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "My father." She stared at the broken window. "We need to board that up. Evelyn, they'll be back." "Wardlow won't let this stand." She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw real fear in her eyes. "You should leave, tonight. I can tell them you ran. They'll chase you, but at least you'll have a chance." "I'm not leaving." "Why? You don't know me." "You don't owe me anything." Jacob sat down across from her, wincing at the bruises already forming. "Because those men were going to hurt you, and I can't abide that. Because Wardlow forced you into this same as he forced me. And because I'm starting to think you're not the villain in this story." Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Then she set the shotgun aside and stood. "Come on, let's board up that window before someone else decides to visit." They worked together in the fading light, nailing boards across the broken window. Jacob found himself acutely aware of her presence, the way she moved, the quiet competence in everything she did. When they finished, she made coffee, and they sat at the table, the first time they'd shared a space like this. "I need to tell you something," Evelyn said, staring into her cup. "About my husbands." Jacob waited. "They did die in their sleep. That part is true. But it wasn't poison, and it wasn't magic." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My father was a doctor. Army surgeon during the war. He taught me things, anatomy, pressure points, ways to stop a man's heart without leaving a mark." The words hung between them. "You killed them," Jacob said. "Not an accusation, just a statement of fact." "I killed them because they were killing me. Slowly, over months. Samuel broke my arm twice. Marcus cracked 3 of my ribs and knocked out a tooth. Cole nearly strangled me to death." She looked at him, and there was no apology in her eyes. "The law didn't care. The town didn't care. So I made them care. Why didn't you just leave?" "Where would I go? I had no money, no family. This land was the only thing I owned, and Wardlow made it clear that if I tried to sell, he'd block it. He wanted me trapped here, wanted me to suffer for daring to survive Samuel." She set down her cup. "So I survived the only way I knew how." Jacob processed this, fitting it together with everything else he'd observed. "But you stopped, after Cole." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I realized Wardlow would keep sending men until one of them either killed me or proved I was a murderer. I couldn't win. So I decided to just endure, live alone, work my land, and wait for him to get tired of the game. Except he sent me. Except he sent you." She met his eyes. "You're different from the others. You haven't tried to hurt me. You haven't demanded anything from me. You're just here. I told you. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice tonight. You could have let those men do what they wanted. Would have made your life easier. Instead, you stood with me." She stood, collecting their cups. "The barn's not safe anymore. Wardlow knows where you sleep. You can have the bedroom tonight. I'll take the main room. Evelyn, I'm not asking you to trust me, Mr. Marrow, but I am asking you to believe that I meant what I said. I won't kill you. You have my word." She disappeared into the bedroom and emerged with blankets and a pillow, making a bed on the floor near the boarded window. Jacob watched her, this woman who'd killed 3 men to survive, and felt something shift in his understanding of the world. Maybe there were worse things than murder. Maybe sometimes survival required blood. He went into the bedroom, closed the door, and lay down on the bed. It smelled faintly of lavender. Outside, the night was quiet except for the wind. He thought about Tucson, about the rancher's son he'd killed, about how similar their stories were. Both of them had killed to protect someone weaker. Both of them had been marked as criminals for it. He fell asleep wondering if justice and law were the same thing, and decided they probably weren't. Wardlow came 3 days later, riding up to the house with 6 men. Jacob was outside splitting wood when he saw them. He set down the axe and walked to meet them, positioning himself between Wardlow and the house. Evelyn appeared on the porch, the shotgun in her hands but pointed at the ground. Wardlow dismounted, his face red with anger. "You shot one of my men. He broke into my house," Evelyn said calmly. "I defended my property." "Your property?" Wardlow's laugh was ugly. "Everything you have is because I allow it. This land, this house, your life, all of it exists at my pleasure. Then why not just take it?" Jacob asked. "Why all this theater?" Wardlow turned to him. "Because this is a civilized town, Mr. Marrow. We have laws. We have procedures. I can't just take a woman's land without cause. But if she's a murderer, if she hangs for her crimes, then the land reverts to the town. Legal and proper. Except she's not a murderer. 3 dead husbands say otherwise. 3 dead husbands who beat her, who terrorized her. She defended herself." Wardlow's expression hardened. "So she told you, did she? And you believe her?" "I do." "Then you're a fool." Wardlow walked closer, his men spreading out behind him. "Here's how this is going to work. You have 2 weeks to get me proof of how she killed those men. Testimony, evidence, something I can use. If you do, I'll honor our agreement. You go free, she hangs, and we're all happy. And if I don't? Then I'll assume she's corrupted you somehow, and I'll bring in someone else. Someone who won't be swayed by a pretty face and a sad story." He glanced at Evelyn. "And you, my dear, will find yourself without a husband again. Except this time, the next one won't be so understanding. You can't keep doing this," Evelyn said, her voice tight with controlled rage. "Eventually, people will see what you are. People see what I want them to see. And right now, they see a murderous widow and the poor fool she's about to kill." Wardlow mounted his horse. 2 weeks, Marrow. Don't disappoint me." They rode away, leaving dust hanging in the air. Jacob turned to Evelyn. "We need to talk." They sat in the house, the door locked, the shotgun on the table between them. "He's not going to stop," Evelyn said. "You understand that, right? He'll keep sending men until one of them kills me or I kill them. And either way, he wins. Not if we leave. Where? We have no money. You're wanted in Tucson. I'm marked as a killer here. We'd be running forever." Jacob leaned back in his chair, thinking. "What if we turn it around on him?" "What do you mean?" "He wants proof you're a killer. What if we give him proof he's the killer?" Evelyn frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Think about it. Your first husband was his nephew. What if Samuel's death wasn't about you at all? What if Wardlow wanted Samuel dead and used you to do it? That doesn't make sense. Samuel was family. Was he? Or was he competition?" Jacob stood, pacing. "Wardlow owns everything in this town. What if Samuel wanted a piece of that? What if they fought and Wardlow saw a way to get rid of him and blame you? You're reaching. Maybe, but it's worth looking into." He turned to her. "You said your father was a doctor. Did he teach you anything about investigating deaths?" "Some." "Why?" "Because if we can prove that Samuel's death wasn't your fault, that Wardlow had a hand in it somehow, then we can discredit everything else he's accused you of." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "The doctor who examined Samuel might still have records. Dr. Ashford, he's old, but he was thorough. Then we start there. Jacob." She looked at him seriously. "If we do this, if we go after Wardlow, there's no going back. He'll kill us both. He's going to kill us anyway. At least this way we fight back." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "You're crazier than I am, probably. But I'm tired of running, and I'm tired of powerful men hurting people because they can. If we're going to die, let's die making it count. Evelyn stood and offered her hand. Partners? Jacob shook it. Her grip was strong, calloused from work. Partners. Dr. Ashford lived in a small house behind the general store, surrounded by books and medical journals that overflowed from shelves onto every available surface. He was a thin, stooped man in his 70s, with wispy white hair and eyes that were still sharp behind thick spectacles. He recognized Evelyn immediately when they knocked on his door that evening. "Mrs. Cross," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here. Dr. Ashford, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I need to ask about Samuel Wardlow's death." The old man's expression grew wary. "That was 7 years ago. I know, but I need to know exactly what you found when you examined him. I wrote a report." "It's on file with the sheriff. Please," Evelyn said. "I just need to know the truth." Ashford looked between them, then sighed and opened the door wider. "Come in, but I can't talk long. If Wardlow finds out you were here, there'll be trouble." They sat among the towers of books while Ashford shuffled through files in a battered desk. He pulled out a folder, opened it, and scanned the contents. "Samuel Wardlow," he read, age 22. "Found deceased in his bed on the morning of March 15, 1878. No visible signs of trauma. No evidence of poisoning in the blood or stomach contents. Heart had simply stopped." "But?" Jacob prompted, sensing there was more. Ashford hesitated. "There were some unusual findings. Bruising around the base of his skull, very faint. Could have been from lying on the pillow, or could have been something else. I noted it in my report, but Silas Wardlow dismissed it as irrelevant. What else could it have been from? Pressure. Applied correctly to certain points on the skull and neck, you can cause cardiac arrest. It's a technique some soldiers learned during the war, interrogators mostly. Leaves almost no trace." Evelyn went very still. "My father taught me that technique." "I know," Ashford said quietly. "That's why Wardlow blamed you. But here's the thing, you would have needed to apply sustained pressure for several minutes. The victim would have been conscious, fighting back. There would have been other signs. Scratches, disturbed bedclothes, something. But there was nothing. It was as if Samuel just went to sleep and never woke up." "So what killed him?" Jacob asked. "I don't know. But I've always wondered." Ashford trailed off, then shook his head. "No, it's too far-fetched." "Please," Evelyn said. "Anything could help." The old doctor sighed. "Silas came to see me the day before Samuel died. He asked me about certain medications, specifically heart stimulants. Said he was having chest pains and wanted to know what might help. I gave him some digitalis, told him to take it carefully. Too much can cause heart failure." The pieces clicked into place in Jacob's mind. "He poisoned his own nephew. I have no proof of that. The tests I ran showed no digitalis in Samuel's system. But if it was administered correctly, timed right, it could have metabolized before death occurred." Ashford closed the file. "I told the sheriff about my suspicions, but he works for Wardlow. Nothing came of it." "Would you testify to this?" Jacob asked. "Testify? Where?" "There's no court here except Wardlow's court. No law except his law." Ashford shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. I'm an old man. I have no desire to spend my remaining years fighting a battle I can't win." They left the doctor's house with more questions than answers, but at least now they had a direction. As they walked back through the dark streets, Jacob felt the weight of watching eyes. Wardlow's men, probably. The town had become a prison. "We need more," Evelyn said quietly. "One doctor's suspicions aren't enough. Then we find more. There has to be someone else who knows something, someone who's willing to talk. There might be one person." Evelyn stopped walking. "Samuel had a friend, another ranch hand named Tom Preston. They grew up together. After Samuel died, Tom tried to tell people something wasn't right about the whole thing. Then he disappeared." "Disappeared how?" "Just gone one day. Wardlow said he'd moved on to find work elsewhere, but Tom had family here. A sister. He wouldn't have left without telling her. Where's the sister now? She runs the boarding house on the edge of town. Her name's Martha Preston. They found the boarding house dark, but Martha answered their knock wearing a robe, a lamp in her hand. She was a sturdy woman in her 40s, with the same wary expression everyone in Redemption Spring seemed to wear. When she saw Evelyn, her face hardened. "You've got nerve coming here. Mrs. Preston, please. I need to ask about your brother. My brother's dead. Just like your husband's. I didn't kill them," Evelyn said. "And I don't think your brother just left town. I think Wardlow killed him." Martha's expression flickered. "Get inside, quickly." They entered the boarding house, and Martha led them to a small sitting room away from where her boarders slept. She set the lamp on a table and faced them, arms crossed. "Why are you here?" she asked. "After all this time, why now?" "Because I'm tired of running from something I didn't do," Evelyn said. "And because Wardlow won't stop until I'm dead or discredited. I need to know what your brother knew. What he was going to say before he disappeared." Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then she went to a cabinet and pulled out a letter, yellowed with age. "Tom wrote me this the night before he disappeared. I found it in his room after he was gone. I never showed it to anyone because I was afraid." She handed the letter to Evelyn, who read it aloud. "Martha, if you're reading this, something's happened to me. I can't keep quiet anymore. I saw what Silas did to Samuel. I was there that night, hiding in the shadows because I'd gone to warn Samuel that his uncle was planning something. I watched Silas come into Samuel's room. I saw him hold something over Samuel's face, a cloth, soaked in something. Samuel struggled at first, then went still. Silas waited, then left. I should have stopped him. I should have done something, but I was scared. And now Samuel's dead, and they're blaming Evelyn, and I can't let that stand. Tomorrow I'm going to the sheriff, telling him everything. If I don't make it, you'll know why. Tell Evelyn I'm sorry. Tell her Samuel loved her, despite what he became. Tell her none of this was her fault. Tom." The silence that followed was heavy with grief and rage. "Chloroform," Jacob said. "That's what Silas used. Knocked him out, probably overdosed him, made it look like he died in his sleep. The digitalis would have been a backup in case the chloroform didn't work." "But why?" Martha asked. "Why kill his own nephew?" "Because Samuel was going to inherit a portion of Silas's holdings," Evelyn said slowly, remembering. "It was in his father's will. Samuel's father was Silas's older brother. When Samuel turned 25, he was supposed to get half of everything. The land, the businesses, all of it. He would have had as much power as Silas. And Silas couldn't allow that," Jacob finished. "So he killed Samuel and framed you. 2 birds with 1 stone. He keeps everything. And he gets rid of the woman Samuel married against his wishes." Martha sat down heavily. "Tom knew all of this. And Silas killed him for it. Where do you think your brother's body is?" Jacob asked. "The old mine shaft, north of town. It's abandoned, dangerous. They use it for dumping sometimes." Her voice broke. "I looked once, but I couldn't go down there alone. I was too afraid of what I'd find." "We'll look," Evelyn said. "And if we find him, we'll make sure everyone knows the truth." Martha looked at her with tears in her eyes. "I blamed you. All these years, I thought you'd killed Samuel, and I let Silas use me to spread those rumors. I'm so sorry. You didn't know. None of us did." Evelyn took Martha's hand. "But we know now. And we're going to make it right." The mine shaft was a 3-hour ride north, through terrain that grew increasingly rough. They went at night, taking the gray Marrow and another horse Martha lent them, moving carefully to avoid Wardlow's men. Jacob had taken a rifle from the house, and Evelyn carried her shotgun. Neither of them spoke much during the ride, both lost in their own thoughts. The mine entrance was a black mouth in the side of a hill, shored up with rotting timbers. A chain across the opening bore a rusted sign, "Condemned, keep out." Jacob lit a lantern, and they stepped inside. The mine shaft descended at a steep angle, the air growing colder and damper as they went deeper. Their footsteps echoed in the darkness, And Jacob kept seeing shapes in the shadows that turned out to be rock formations or old equipment. After about 100 yards, the shaft opened into a larger chamber. That's where they found the bodies. There were 3 of them, in various stages of decay. 2 were clearly very old, probably miners who died when the shaft was still active. But the 3rd was newer, maybe 7 years old, dressed in the rotted remains of ranch clothes. "Tom," Evelyn whispered. Jacob examined the body carefully. The skull showed signs of trauma, a heavy blow to the back of the head. "Murder, clear and simple." "We need to bring him up," Jacob said. "Get the sheriff to see this. The sheriff works for Wardlow." "I know, but Martha's testimony, combined with the letter in this body, might be enough to at least raise questions." "Doubt is all we need. If people start doubting Wardlow, his power crumbles." They were fashioning a litter from timber when they heard voices from the mine entrance. Jacob extinguished the lantern immediately, plunging them into darkness. Evelyn pressed close to him, and he could feel her heart beating fast. They waited, listening. "Sure they came this way?" A voice echoed down the shaft. Martha Preston was seen talking to them. "Only reason they'd come out here is the mine. That was Wardlow himself. If they found Tom's body, we have a problem. So what do? Seal the entrance. Bury them both. By the time anyone finds them, it'll look like they were exploring and there was a cave-in. Tragic accident." Footsteps retreated. Then came the sound of rocks falling, heavy timbers crashing. The mine entrance was collapsing. Jacob grabbed Evelyn's hand and ran deeper into the mine, away from the collapsing entrance. Behind them, the sound grew louder, echoing through the tunnels. Dust filled the air, choking them. They ran blind, desperate, until Jacob's foot hit empty air and they both fell. They tumbled down a slope, rocks cutting and bruising them, until they crashed onto a stone floor. Jacob's lantern had shattered in the fall, but somehow it had also started a small fire. The oil was burning, giving them just enough light to see. They were in a natural cavern, far below the mine shaft. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. The air was cold and smelled of minerals. "Are you hurt?" Jacob asked, checking Evelyn for injuries. "Bruised, but nothing broken." She looked around. "Where are we? I don't know. But the entrance is buried. We need to find another way out." They salvaged what they could from the broken lantern, using Jacob's shirt to make a torch. The cavern stretched in multiple directions, tunnels branching off into darkness. They chose one at random and started walking. For hours they wandered through the underground maze, following water sounds, hoping it would lead to an exit. They talked to keep their spirits up, sharing stories from their pasts. Jacob told her about growing up on a farm in Kansas, about learning to shoot from his father, about the war and the things he'd seen. Evelyn told him about her childhood, her father's lessons, the way he'd tried to prepare her for a world that was cruel to women. "He taught me to defend myself," she said, her voice echoing in the tunnel. "But he also taught me to heal. He wanted me to be a doctor like him. Said the world needed more healers and fewer killers. You think he'd be disappointed in you? For what you did to those men. I think he'd understand. He killed men too, during the war, when he had to. He said sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become one, just for a moment." She paused. "But he also said you have to be careful not to stay a monster. That's the real danger. You're not a monster, Evelyn. You're a survivor. Maybe there's not much difference." They walked in silence for a while longer, until Jacob's torch burned low and they had to stop to rest. They sat against a cavern wall, pressed together for warmth in the cold darkness. "If we don't make it out," Evelyn said quietly, "I want you to know you're a good man, Jacob Marrow. Better than you think you are. We'll make it out. I didn't survive this long just to die in a hole in the ground. You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise that I'll fight until my last breath to get you out of here. You deserve better than this. Better than Wardlow, better than this town, better than all of it." She turned to him in the darkness, and he felt her hand find his face. "Why are you doing this, really? It's not just about survival or revenge. What is it?" Jacob thought about that question, about all the years of running and hiding and surviving. About the moment he'd shot Thomas Brennan, knowing it was right, but that the law wouldn't see it that way. About standing in that chapel, watching Evelyn walk in to be sacrificed to someone else's greed. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped being a victim and started being your husband. And that means something to me, even if it doesn't mean anything to anyone else. Evelyn kissed him then, soft and tentative in the darkness. It was nothing like passion or desire. It was gratitude and recognition and the acknowledgement that they were no longer alone in this. When she pulled back, Jacob could hear her smile in her voice. Then I guess we'd better not die down here. Wouldn't want to waste a perfectly good marriage. They stood and kept walking. The water sound grew louder, and eventually they emerged into a larger cavern where an underground stream flowed. Following it, they found themselves climbing up through a narrow crevice, squeezing through rock that scraped their skin and tore their clothes. But there, finally, was light, not the sun, but moonlight, filtering through an opening in the rocks. They crawled out into the cool night air, emerging on the side of a canyon miles from where they'd entered the mine. They were bruised, bloody, exhausted, but alive. "We need to get back to town," Evelyn said. "Martha's in danger. If Wardlow thinks we're dead, he might go after her next." They walked through the night, following the stars until they reached Martha's boarding house just before dawn. She opened the door at their knock, her face going white when she saw them. "We thought you were dead. Wardlow told everyone there was a cave-in, that you'd been killed. He's planning a funeral service today. We need to go to that funeral," Jacob said. "We need everyone in town to see us alive. He'll kill you the moment you show your faces. Maybe, or maybe people will finally start asking why he's so determined to see us dead." Martha looked between them, then nodded. "There's a service at noon. The whole town will be there. Wardlow's made sure of it. He wants to control the narrative, make you martyrs to his cause. Then let's give him a narrative he didn't expect." They cleaned up as best they could, borrowed clothes from Martha, and armed themselves. The service was being held in the town square, and as noon approached, the entire population of Redemption Spring gathered. Wardlow stood at the front, dressed in black, playing the grieving community leader. "We're here today," he was saying, "to mourn the tragic loss of two souls who strayed from the path of righteousness. Jacob Marrow and Evelyn Cross, taken from us by their own reckless actions. The reports of our death have been greatly exaggerated," Jacob said, stepping into the square. The crowd gasped. People moved back as Jacob and Evelyn walked forward, bruised and battered but very much alive. Wardlow's face went through several expressions in quick succession: shock, fear, rage, before settling on cold calculation. "Jacob, Evelyn, thank God you're alive. We thought you'd been killed in the mine collapse." "Collapse?" Jacob said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Is that what you're calling it? Because it seemed more like you deliberately buried us alive." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Wardlow raised his hands. "You're confused. The trauma of the experience. We found Tom Preston's body," Evelyn said. "In the mine where you dumped him 7 years ago. He was murdered. Struck on the back of the head. That's absurd. Tom left town. He left a letter," Martha said, stepping forward with the document, "describing how he saw you murder Samuel Wardlow. How you used chloroform to stop his heart, then blamed Evelyn for his death." Wardlow's composure cracked. "That letter is a forgery." Tom was disturbed, unreliable. "And the doctor's testimony?" Jacob pressed. "About how you asked him for digitalis the day before Samuel died. About the bruising on Samuel's skull that suggested foul play." The crowd was murmuring louder now, people exchanging glances, doubts spreading like wildfire. Wardlow's men moved forward, hands on their guns, but the townspeople were between them and Jacob and Evelyn. "You killed your own nephew to keep his inheritance," Jacob continued. "Then you killed Tom Preston to hide your crime. And you've spent 7 years terrorizing Evelyn, trying to force her into a position where she'd either kill or be killed, so you could finally take her land. Lies, Wardlow snarled. All lies told by a murderer and the woman who's corrupted him. Then let's ask the doctor, someone in the crowd shouted. Let's hear what he has to say. Dr. Ashford stepped forward, looking old and tired but resolute. It's true, all of it. I've kept silent too long out of fear. But I won't be silent anymore. Silas Wardlow is a murderer, and we've all been complicit by looking the other way. The crowd's mood shifted. People who'd been Wardlow's supporters were backing away, reevaluating. His men looked uncertain, realizing they might be on the wrong side of history. Wardlow drew his pistol. Enough. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I killed Samuel. He was weak, just like his father. He would have ruined everything I built. And yes, I killed Tom Preston for knowing too much. And I'll kill all of you if that's what it takes to keep what's mine. He aimed at Evelyn, but Jacob was faster. The rifle he'd been carrying came up, and he fired before Wardlow could. The shot took the older man in the shoulder, spinning him around. Wardlow's gun fell from his hand. Wardlow's men started to draw their weapons, but the townspeople surged forward, disarming them. Years of fear and resentment boiled over in an instant. Wardlow tried to run, but the crowd held him fast. The sheriff, who'd been conspicuously quiet until now, finally stepped forward, face red with embarrassment. Silas Wardlow, I'm placing you under arrest for the murders of Samuel Wardlow and Tom Preston. You can't do this, Wardlow snarled, clutching his wounded shoulder. I own this town. I own all of you. Not anymore, Martha Preston said quietly. Not anymore. The trial took 3 weeks to organize. A judge was brought in from the territorial capital, and witnesses testified to everything they'd seen and heard over the years. Dr. Ashford spoke about the suspicious circumstances of Samuel's death. Martha produced Tom's letter. Jacob and Evelyn testified about the attempted murder in the mine. Even some of Wardlow's own men turned on him, eager to save themselves. Wardlow was found guilty on 2 counts of murder and sentenced to hang. On the day of the execution, Jacob and Evelyn stood in the crowd, watching as justice was finally served. It felt hollow somehow. Samuel and Tom were still dead. The years of suffering couldn't be undone. But it was something. What will you do now? Martha asked them afterward. The land is yours, Evelyn. Legally, properly yours. Wardlow's claim is void. Evelyn looked at Jacob. I don't know. I've spent so long fighting just to survive. I'm not sure what to do with peace. We could stay, Jacob said. Work the land. Build something real. The town will always remember what they thought I was. Then we go somewhere else. Montana, maybe. Wyoming. Somewhere we can start fresh. Evelyn considered this, then nodded. Together? Together. They sold the land to Martha Preston, who'd always wanted a place of her own. With the money, they bought supplies, 2 horses, and headed north. The wanted posters for Jacob had been cleared once his self-defense claim was verified, and Evelyn's name had been restored. They were free, both of them, for the first time in years. They made it to Montana by late fall, finding a valley where the grass grew tall and the mountains protected them from the worst of the winter winds. They built a cabin, small but sturdy, and spent the winter getting to know each other properly, not as forced spouses or desperate allies, but as people who'd chosen to be together. Evelyn taught Jacob the healing techniques her father had taught her. Jacob taught Evelyn to read tracks and hunt. They worked side by side, building a life from nothing, and slowly the wounds of their pasts began to heal. On a spring morning, as they stood on their porch watching the sun rise over the mountains, Evelyn spoke. Do you ever regret it? Choosing to stay with me? Jacob thought about that question, about all the twists of fate that had brought them together. The murder in Tucson, the bounty hunters, Wardlow's scheme. Any one thing different, and they never would have met. No, he said finally. I regret a lot of things in my life. But you're not one of them. Evelyn leaned against him, and they stood together in comfortable silence. They'd both been broken by the world, both forced into choices no one should have to make. But somehow, in the crucible of redemption spring, They'd found something neither of them had expected. Not forgiveness, that was too simple. Not redemption, that was too grand. They'd found partnership. They'd found someone who understood that survival sometimes required violence, that justice and law weren't always the same, and that choosing to stand beside someone when the whole world was against them was its own kind of love. In the distance, a wolf howled. Jacob felt Evelyn's hand slip into his, and he squeezed it gently. They'd survived. They'd won. And now they had something even more dangerous than either of them had faced before. They had a future. And that, Jacob thought as the sun climbed higher, painting the valley in golden shadow, was terrifying and wonderful all at once. The dust settled on their story, as dust always does in the West. The people of Redemption Spring eventually moved on, the scandal fading into local legend. Some said Evelyn Cross had been a witch after all, using her powers to survive. Others said she'd been innocent all along, a victim of a cruel man's greed. But those who knew the truth understood something different. They understood that sometimes the monsters aren't the ones the town points at. Sometimes the real monsters wear respectable clothes and hold positions of power. Sometimes they hide behind law and propriety while destroying lives. And sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become something just as fierce, just as unyielding, just as willing to fight. Evelyn Cross and Jacob Marrow never became saints. They never pretended their hands were clean. But they'd chosen each other in the hardest moment, when they could have chosen safety or revenge or cowardice. They'd chosen to stand together when the world wanted them broken and alone. And in the end, when the guns fell silent and the accusations faded and the judgment of others became just noise in the wind, that choice was the only one that mattered. Because love, real love, the kind forged in blood and terror and impossible odds, isn't about perfection. It's about looking at someone who's seen your worst self, your most desperate moments, your darkest secrets, and having them look back and say, "I'm still here. I'm still standing beside you. And I'm not going anywhere." That's the secret Evelyn Cross hid. Not violence, not death, not some supernatural curse. Just the simple, terrifying truth that she was strong enough to survive anything the world threw at her. And in Jacob Marrow, she'd finally found someone strong enough to survive beside her.
Thanks for watching this story till the end. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And before you go, check out these other amazing Western stories waiting for you next. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you on the next ride.